I was surprised that Alex Orji did not start last week against Fresno State. Davis Warren got the nod. He played the majority of the snaps in game one. Do we expect the same tomorrow? Are we going to see both quarterbacks? Do you have any clue what Michigan is going to try to do offensively against Texas?
Yeah, you'll probably see both quarterbacks. I don't think it'll be 50-50. It might be more balanced than last week. I imagine a lot of the stuff that they have for Alex Orji, probably they were like, we don't need to show Texas what our game plan is just yet. But it did seem like there was a pattern of him coming in on second downs. Obviously, with his athleticism, he's a run-first guy, at least until proven otherwise. So far in his college career, he's attempted 3 passes, and he has 26 carries. So that should tell you kind of the ratio that they like for him. Obviously, he's got a strong arm, but I think accuracy and touch and kind of reading the defense is the next step for him. And yeah, it's all a big surprise. I mean, most teams of Michigan's caliber at this point, they just go NIL shopping and get a transfer portal quarterback, don't they? I mean, Washington, Ohio State, Oregon, that's just in the Big Ten that I'm thinking of. Either you have that or you have a former 5-star guy. Michigan, this year, they lost J.J. McCarthy. They didn't go get a guy, and they have Jaden Davis. He's a true freshman, but the 2022, 2023 classes, they didn't really go get like a guy anyone was expecting to be a multi-year starter. So it's a big dice roll for Michigan. I mean, some of it's not their fault with the timing of JJ's decision, the national championship, and obviously Jim Harbaugh's decision as well. But yeah, I'm surprised they didn't go get someone in the spring portal. You think Michigan could probably just call up any group of 5 quarterback and under the table, of course, and go get one. But still, Davis Warren, it sounds like he's going to be the starter. Great story. Beat leukemia in high school. He was a walk-on more so because he didn't play his junior and senior seasons, one for leukemia, one for COVID. So, cool story. I think he's better than a typical walk-on that you see nowadays. But at the same time, against Fresno State, you saw some of the limitations. This is still a passing offense, in the receiver room as well. Not a lot of experience there, not a lot of height there, not a lot of top recruits. It's not a position that Michigan has been able to recruit as well as others. And so, yeah, this passing game is very much in transition, but they're going to need every ounce of passing they can get because they need to open up that defense so they can run the ball like they like to.
And speaking of running the ball, I mean, the getting Donovan Edwards going, they did not get that done last week. And it doesn't sound like they really care about getting him going. The other young guy, they love the way he runs, but Donovan Edwards is still the beast, of the Midwest, really, when it comes to running the football. I don't see what the problem is with him. I don't think there is a problem with him. I can't believe they think the other kid is better, or kind of on par, but they seem that obviously offensively they felt that way. Maybe it's the young offensive line. Donovan Edwards still kind of feeling his way. He had the studs, in front of him last year. These kids are a little bit different. Are they on par as running backs, or what's the deal offensively with them in the run game right now?
Yeah, to kind of answer the first part, they want Donovan Edwards to be the lead guy. He was voted team captain, and Michigan's running backs coach. He met with us this week, and he was. You can tell they're trying to not call him out publicly. They're big on behind the scenes. Let's talk about it.
Sure.
So he kind of hinted at it though. He was like, the big talk with Donovan after the game was, you're a captain. This team is looking for you and how you respond week 1 to week 2, and they're going to follow your lead. And with Donovan's game, I mean, yeah, you can look at the national championship game. You can look at the Ohio State game a couple years ago. The Big Ten championship game a couple years ago. Man, he as good of a big play threat as there is probably in the Big Ten. And so, they want that from him. And I think the next step for him is also kind of those 4 and 5 yard carries instead of 1 or 2 yard carries. So that's, they need him. I mean, if they're going to have a chance to beat Texas, they're going to need Donovan Edwards to look like he looks in the video game, to look like he's looked in the championship game, look like he looks.
Every game that I've seen him just about look, yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of the big games, I'll give him credit for this. I always kind of laugh when players are like, yeah, I show up for the big games. He has. The numbers suggest he's actually better against top 5, top 10 opponents than he is in other games. So, this is a big opportunity for him. To the other guy, though, Caleb Mullings, I don't think they think he's better, but as any running back room will say, I mean, you got to go with who's running hardest, who's got the hot hand. And so he had a nice game against Fresno State, especially in that fourth quarter, maybe when Michigan's starting to sweat a little bit. He kind of put the game away. And so, yeah, I think they view it as a little bit of 1A, 1B. But, man, if Donovan shows up Saturday and he gets a couple big carries, they have no problem, giving him the rock 20, 25 times if that's what it takes.
Yeah. Michigan beat writer Zach Schall of 24/7 Sports joining us this morning on Bucky and BK. Zach, tell us about Colston Loveland, man. I mean, you talked about the receivers at Michigan not doing a whole lot last week, but the tight end sure as hell did. I thought Brock Bowers was supposed to be in the NFL somewhere, but it almost looks like Brock Bowers reincarnated in Ann Arbor. So tell us about his game and what type of matchup problems he poses for Texas.
Yeah, I think just for the numbers for the fans at home, last week they threw to Colston Loveland 9 times. He had 8 catches, 87 yards. They threw to everyone else 18 times, 8 catches, 34 yards. So, I mean, they really didn't have a passing game except throwing it to Colston Loveland. And yeah, he's been a matchup problem. I mean, I can go back to different games over the past few years. You're talking about Ryan Day, Nick Saban, all these guys, they talk, all these guys, they talk about he's the toughest matchup. And this was when he was a freshman or sophomore, and now he's a junior. He's refined his game. And one thing that Michigan has added for him, and part of it's because they don't have a lot of height or experience at the receiver position, they've started putting him out wide and in the slot a little bit more than just an inline position. So, yeah, they view him as a Kelsey, Gronk type player that can really be the go-to guy, even though he's a tight end. And Michigan's had some good tight ends over the years, but, Jake Butt, former Mackey Award winner, former All-American tight end, he said, this guy's better than I ever was. And so, yeah, he's really impressive. Obviously, the rent for that kind of praise is due every week. But yeah, he's someone that Michigan feels like they can lean on, and they're going to have to. I mean, I'm sure Texas is doing everything they can to slow him down. But, 6'5", moving like that, making plays in the air, high pointing the ball like he does. And then also the after catch ability. I mean, this is a guy that it's at the college level. There's just not a lot of players that can just shift over and cover the guy one-on-one, right? You do have to be creative with how you defend him. So, yeah, he'll be a big factor in this game. I mean, if Texas finds a way to shut him down, one, they'll be the first team that I can recall doing so. But then two, I don't know where else Michigan's going to throw the ball consistently.
Yeah, when you look at him, it's a matter of, okay, if he catches it, fine. If he gets tackled, but if he catches it and has room to run, because the guy's so tall, I mean, he's going to fall for 6 yards. I mean, if he just trips and starts to lose his balance forward, there's another 6 immediately on him. So it's almost a matter of, okay, he can go and catch balls in zones, but he has to be tackled immediately because his ability to run after the catch is not like he's got great speed, but he's got an elusive ability to make you miss. And then if you do tackle him, he falls forward. He never gets knocked backwards.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And I think he's gotten better each year too, because he was someone that, I mean, he was from Idaho, like a town of 3,000. So Michigan, they felt like they had the inside track. And then Nick Saban comes along and says, you're the best tight end I've ever recruited. And so suddenly Michigan's like, okay, we got to lock this down. Right. And they did. And he was really good as a freshman. But, last year, I think he added a lot of the grit. He added some of the weight, very typical for tight ends. And then this year, I think he's really, added some speed while keeping that grip, but understanding that he can be a guy who can make plays after the catch, make plays in the slot. You don't, just because you're a tight end doesn't mean you have to, hunker downfield for 8 yards and then go down. I mean, you can be a legitimate big play threat on a consistent basis, especially at the college level for him. But yeah, he's really impressive. I've seen him projected to be a first round pick. It's hard to argue with that kind of analysis.
Zach, let me ask you about this. I mean, this is the defending national champs. They have talent. They've already been able to recruit backups, talent, offensive line. We can talk about the offensive line all we want about how the other guys have gone to the NFL, but they look the same. They look the same as those other guys. They may not play like it right away, but they'll get to that point. But one thing that you can't just turn the switch off and on with is coaches. There's a lot of different coaches on that staff right now, and the communications between the players and the coaches right now in game one, there was a filling out process. Game two, it'll be a little bit better. Everybody talks about the difference between how you are in game one and game two.
Yep.
But for a team that's looking to win back-to-back national titles and be in the 12-team playoff, there's still some things that they have to to get straightened out between the communications of those new coaches, the players, and the other coaches, I believe. You lose a lot of guys.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Just the organization of the game day rituals, making sure your personnel is out there. I mean, it's all a process because, it wasn't that just Jim Harbaugh was who coached these players. He's been the coach for almost a decade. And so, yeah, a lot of this stuff was just kind of like built in. And now, I think Sherrone Moore and who is like an internal hire, he's keeping a lot of the same things going. But there, just little differences. You start to realize like, oh, yeah, we have a different protocol now for like, our third down rotations and what we say, just this little terminology changes. And on the defensive side, they have all new assistant coaches and they kept the scheme the same because they had Jesse Minter and now they have Wink Martindale who mentored and taught Jesse Minter how to coordinate a defense. But yeah, there's definitely an adjustment period. And I think a big thing will be, Michigan will disagree with this, but I think the players and the coaches kind of viewed last week as a disappointing performance, and they viewed it as something that they need to get better at. And so how do you strike that balance? And I think Donovan, as you mentioned, was a good example of how do you make sure you're holding him accountable, you're showing him how he can be better without discouraging the confidence that he built in fall camp. And so, I think that's part of it too, is Michigan, they obviously Texas has been on their mind since January. If it hasn't, that's on them. But how do you make sure that you're correcting what happened in week one, but you're not overcorrecting what happened in week one and understanding, thinking about the offensive line, thinking about the communication between everybody on the field, some of that you just are naturally going to be better week one to week two. And so, how do you make sure you're correcting the mistakes, but not correcting what you've practiced all off season?
It's good stuff. Michigan beat writer Zach Shaw joining us for a few more minutes here on Texas Sports Unfiltered. Zach, is it true that Sherrone Moore is coaching without a contract right now?
Yeah, I guess so. They have a memorandum of understanding, which I think is fairly common in college football just because of all those weird NCAA recruiting rules. You don't necessarily want to, have a guy not be able to recruit, especially your head coach, if he hasn't signed anything. And he was an internal hire, so I think, and he's been there for 6 years. So I think initially there was some built-in trust. As far as why this didn't get resolved in June and why it's a national story now, that's between Michigan and Michigan. That's their own. I don't know if it's fault. That's their own decision to make. And Ward Manuel talked about it. He did not seem concerned, when he was talking about it. But at the same time, he was not in a setting where us reporters could ask him, like, "Hey, why? What's going on? Why is this a problem? Or you don't think this is a bad look?" And so I don't know every little detail. I mean, he's technically getting paid and he is signed on to coach the team, but it's not a full formal contract. And I get why you do that maybe in January, February to get your recruiting going, kind of allow him to be in the office and actually coaching players. But between spring practices and fall camp, you've got about 3 months. I don't know what they do with their days, but I feel like signing a contract would be a high priority for me, especially with that amount of money involved.
Zach, will Michigan move Grant and Graham over the top of the center during the course of the game? Because our center, I mean, he's like a 12th year player, but my God, can you just put one of them over there? Will they both move all over the defensive line? Can you move them both out at tackle, and can you move them both at nose guard? Will they both play nose guard at some given time during the course of the game?
Potentially. Kenneth Grant, he's probably just playing nose, right? 340 pounds, right? But Mason, he can kind of move into a couple roles, and they've got a few other guys they'll rotate in, and yeah, it's a great unit, that defensive front, and the edge guys had a really nice game against Fresno State too, Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore, and so they feel like they have a very good defensive line. I think the next step will be just finding the depth, because last year, I mean, technically they were rotating on a 50-50 basis. The guys that they had in for the fourth down stop against Alabama, that was their second string defensive line. And so very impressive depth last year. I think that's the next step this year, is they would love to be able to rotate guys, but Mason, he's the guy you can't really take off the field too. So I think they're okay with what they've got there, and great at getting to the quarterback, great at stopping the run. That top four on that defensive line. And I'll throw Rayshon Benny in there as well. That's a group Michigan feels will keep them in these kind of games as their passing game develops.
Will the weakness be in the linebacker area? Because there's no weakness in the secondary, because the two corners are ridiculous at 6'2", which I'm still looking at them saying those guys aren't 6'2", but I guess they are. They play like they're 6'2", 6'5", or whatever. Is the linebacker area maybe the weakest part of the defense right now?
I think the weak part's actually maybe the in-between defensive back roles. They've got a 6-year guy at safety, Quentin Johnson, who I think has had ups, and he has not had a lot of experience actually starting, and I think the nickel spot, they've got a guy who did not really play his first 2 years. So I think the big weakness of the defense is just some inexperience in the secondary. At linebacker, they've got Ernest Hausman, Jayshawn Barham. They were both true freshman starters at other Big Ten schools, transferred to Michigan. Hausman did so a year ago. He was third on the team in tackles despite not starting a game. And Barham, if I hear them talk about Jayshawn Barham's freak athleticism one more time in a press conference, I'm gonna, he's one of those dudes, 6'4", 245 pounds, but you watch him move, he's a middle linebacker. And so they think he can be a top 50 NFL draft pick next spring. I think he still has to prove it a little bit on the field, but what he did at Maryland was really impressive. And then Hausman, he's very much a throwback guy. You almost feel like he should have a neck pad, just the way he hits and the way he plays. And so they like their linebacker, their starting duo a lot. I think the two weaknesses of the defense are experience in the secondary outside of Will Johnson and Makari Page. And then also I think the depth, just understanding, hey, some of these guys who've never played at the college level are one play away from being the most important player on the field. So it's a very good defense, though. If their offense was as good as their defense, this would probably be a top 3 matchup.
Wow. Buck, any more for Zach? I'm going to ask a prediction.
Good.
All right.
I'm just, and then, of course, Will Johnson, that dude will be going off to the pros. He will not come back for another year, right?
No. He's projected top 5 pick. He does everything well. Tall, athletic, good gamesmanship, good technique, understands the defense really well. I've heard him described as the best cornerback prospect in, a long, long time. He probably won't go number 1 because cornerbacks don't really go number 1, but as of right now, he's number 1 on a lot of teams' big boards.
Yeah. Zach, last thing. I know you just wrote an article about this, so we'll encourage our audience to follow you on Twitter @_Zach Shaw. But a couple of keys to the game and then a prediction for what goes down tomorrow at the Big House.
Yeah, I think offensively, Michigan, they're not going to win if they don't establish the run. This is what Michigan builds their team for. This is what they recruit for. It'd be kind of like Texas not having an effective passing game. This is what they need. And the numbers don't lie. Against top 15 opponents, they either run the ball well or they lose. So that's key. Donovan Edwards, the offensive line, Kalel Mullings, whoever else is Alex Orji, whoever else is carrying the ball. This has got to be, it's got to be more effective than it was last week for them to win. Defensively, I think the big thing is just not getting lost in all this Steve Sarkisian stuff. I played as Texas in the college football video game. I've watched them play lots of pre-snap stuff. I had like 6 delay of game penalties when I played in Texas, just because, it's just so much motion. There's so much shifting. There's so much efforts to create deception. And so Michigan prides itself on being the smartest defense in college football. Last year, I think they were. This year, I think they're coached to be. I think the question will be, can these new starters, can these new leaders properly communicate everything that's going on the defense? Because I think that's a big key. I think Michigan can stop the run, but that passing game, if you're not careful, I know you guys or Texas can go to like 7 different guys at any time. And so I think a big key will be not getting deceived, not getting, not falling for a mismatch where you've got a linebacker on a speedy slot guy. So ultimately, though, I think, some years in college football, you're the team that returns your starting quarterback, head coach, coordinators, strength coach, and you're ready to roll in week 2. And some years you're the team that returns none of those, and you're entering week 2 with a lot of question marks. So I'm predicting Texas to win. I've got 27-20, but it could go a whole bunch of different ways. Very excited to watch this, though. I mean, Michigan, they'll have a good atmosphere. I'm sure they've got some stuff that they didn't show last week that they would love to show Texas in terms of different looks and different plays. And so I'm so glad that the teams are still doing these big primetime early matchups, not just letting conference play do the talking, but show what you got early.